Welcome to the Tech-Mex podcast. I'm your host, Eric Ramirez, and I've got my awesome co-host here, Mando Gomez.
Mando Gomez. I feel like in the radio, like. So anyway,
Well,
that we are remote here.
we'll be there in no time. Hey, so we've got episode 18, number 18 today, and we're going to be talking about FANG layoffs and just tech jobs in general. Let's get into it. Dale.
Dale. So tell the audience, what is FANG?
FANG. So for those that aren't familiar with the term FANG, it's not FANG, but it is the group of big tech companies like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, that drive a big part of the economic tech sector here in the United States. So when people say I have a FANG job, that usually means they're part of either Facebook, like Meta, or Netflix, or Apple, or one of those companies, right? They work at one of those.
And in some cases right now, because they have been changing their name, like Google changed it to Alphabet, and as well Facebook to Meta, right? Because they are trying to move to different areas like VR and things like that. Maybe that acronym might not be accurate anymore. They are calling it MANGA because they also are trying to include Microsoft or Mang, right? So again, but that's what it refers to, because guess what? There are very high paying jobs. So yeah, when you hear somebody to say, "Hey, I got laid off from FANG," that's what they are meaning. They came from that type of a company.
Yep.
So let's dive into the layoffs. We discussed it a couple of times. What do you think that happened? What is your point of view, or what happened between this year and last year on what is driving the tech layoff?
Well, okay. So generally when everything's going well, right? When all the money's coming in and there's easy money in the economy, they hire a lot, because what's like the most limited resource when it comes to these companies is super high talented workers. So their goal is to hire as many of these good workers as they can, and they kind of let the chips fall where they may when things go south. So, of course, leading up to this kind of post-COVID time, we've been in good economic times with a lot of easy money out there for companies to be able to grow, hire, produce new applications. But ever since post-COVID, things have been slowing down. We've had high inflation. Now, with the Fed making their rate changes and things like that, companies are having to tighten up, because there's either a lot of folks think we're already in a recession, or there's always this looming risk of recession. So companies don't want to be caught off guard with their revenues coming down and still having a high payroll. That's going to lead to big layoffs, and I think that's kind of what we've gone to.
I can see that. I was looking the numbers, about 240,000 people they got laid off, right? So between this company, some of the stats like Meta, it was about 12%, and you have to see the numbers, right? Like how big is the company, right? Some of these companies are 100,000. So 10-12%, they will represent about 13,000 people. So it's a lot of people in the market looking for a job, and so on, right? Like I was working in Amazon for several years. I left Amazon 3 years ago, and over there they're huge. They have like 1.2 million people, right? So, and I believe that it was like about 8% that they lay off people. So that would put them in almost 100,000 people. And guess what? It creates a lot of competition, right? With very, very talented people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're talking about big numbers here. Of course, a lot of these tech companies from FANG, a lot of them are pretty big. Now, some of them have stayed a little bit more conservative, like Netflix. They only had 15,000 people. So when they have to cut jobs, which might only be 4 or 5%, we're talking about under 1,000 people that they have to lay off. So some companies have not bloated all that much. So when they do have to make those cutbacks, it's not going to be that deep. So you might feel a little bit safer in those companies. But for something like Amazon is huge, right? And so if they do a big percentage cut, like you mentioned, almost 100,000 people, You might be one of those impacted, and you have to be aware and make sure you're not kind of going to be targeted in that. And we'll talk a little bit about the strategies for that
Yeah,
here
fear no more.
later in the
We'll discuss
podcast.
it.
That's a little teaser there. But these numbers that we're talking about here, these are from 2023. So these are all recent numbers from this year, knowing that there were still layoffs even last year as well. And this year's not even over. So
Mhm.
who knows what's kind of still coming. I think a lot of it is going to be driven again by how the Fed is reacting and how the economy in general is reacting with the inflation and things slowing down.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and you see it around, right? I have a lot of friends on the industry, and it's kind of the norm. Like, yeah, now I got laid off. I'm trying to land a gig, right? Do you have any experience recently that you have any friends in particular?
Well, not necessarily recently, but I do remember this story where not necessarily getting laid off, but I think we have a mutual friend, and it really it really cracks me up a little bit. He actually quit one of these tech jobs, and he did it in
Okay.
a way that was super interesting. We all kind of knew that some people were looking just because you know of course, a lot of these layoffs happen in cycles. So in one of the previous cycles, we're like, a company may not be looking so good. Some folks are starting to look, and they were making to make their next move.
Okay.
They found their new company, and we were talking, and he's like, "I've got an idea for how to quit. I don't want to do it." In kind of the normal, usual way, I think he was really feeling a certain way about working at this company, right? And so what he did
Sure,
is we
sure,
have our normal weekly staff meetings, and everybody does the round robin. I did twiddle my thumbs this week, or I did whatever this week.
sure.
And when he came up this week, he's like, you know what? I don't feel like working anymore. I quit. And he did this in front of the whole staff to the boss. And we were like, oh my God, he actually did it. But it was actually pretty funny. But in this person's defense, a lot of times workers are treated as just a number, as just another widget. So,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes that really does come across in some of these tech companies when you know that they're about to do layoffs or something like that. So it kind of plays both ways, from worker rights, worker respect, right? I think that's,
Yeah.
but it's just
Well,
kind of one of those funny stories that I've had.
for sure. And here is a controversial portion, right? Because sometimes people don't have sympathy for us as techies. It's like, well, you're making all of this money, you should be able to save up, and you started with Elon, right? Elon was literally laying off people and almost set the trend at the start of because he literally started in October last year, right?
Mm.
I was still in Twitter, and I passed so many of those layers of layoffs, right? Um, so I think that it's just that perspective, right, from different people. I do have another example like that. A friend of mine, he was a little bit resentful with the company, one of 5 companies, and they basically have very there's a lot of written culture. So actually, he quit it with almost an essay.
Not like
Cla-
a essay, but like a written essay.
a
No,
written
did
essay. Yeah, yeah.
he stand
No,
up and
he's
read out
Chinese.
loud?
He's Chinese.
Okay. Hey, you've seen those videos on YouTube of in Japan? They've got essays out there
Yeah,
with the
yeah, that's right,
lowriders
that's
too,
right. No,
man.
but not that type of, not that type of essay. So he wrote an email, just describing the culture in a very professional, but like backstabbing, like uh, kind of the whole process. And yeah, I'm waking up in the middle of the night to answer the call from one call, right? And then
Mhm.
yeah, he broadcasted to his whole org. So I mean, yeah, you can do all of that. But guess what? It was funny because yeah, I think that it got leaked too.
Oh yeah,
So
I bet.
and then his manager asked, that to be able to terminate his employment right away, right? So that way he can have access to sending more email. So yeah,
Yeah.
it is tough. I mean, I hear you, but it is the whole dynamic is difficult for both parties, right? For the company and as well the people that are staying. and as well the people that are leaving. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, it's hard. Like burning bridges. You're
it is.
always told don't burn bridges because you, knowing this all goes in cycles, right? Like, really, do you really want to burn that bridge? Because you could always end up back there, like in 6 months, right? They're like, "Oh crap, we cut you
That
deep.
didn't
We
make me
need to
work right
rehire some
now.
people," right? That sounds familiar,
He
right?
didn't
Didn't
burn the
Elon
bridge,
say
he
that?
burned the boat.
Yeah, exactly. So, always be aware before. I mean, you might be tempted to do some of these things, but be aware that you never know that hiring manager that you like put through the ringer, they
Oh.
might be in the position to hire you back. So be
Yeah,
aware. Only
and
only do it if you really want.
yeah, because
Yeah.
to be honest, the industry is very small. I am actually quite shocked how, in some cases, when I'm interviewing people, sometimes I have worked with the people before in a different company. So yeah, it's very very small. Uh, so okay, let's figure out here now. Maybe one question that the audience would have is like, how I can tell if I'm probably gonna be laid off, right? Like, and it's a good question, right? Like maybe if you're working on a tech job, it's like maybe let's go through some of the things that we think that maybe because you're a leader, I'm a leader, right? So we kind of know sometimes the how the game is playing, right? And yeah, from your perspective, what are some of the things that they can take a look?
So, I mean, one of the things that you can do, and this is probably true of any big company, if you're working at a public company, doesn't necessarily have to be in tech, but you should keep up with how the performance of your company is doing, right? There's these things like quarterly reports that you can take a look at to see, hey, how is revenue? Like how, how, how is your company even profitable? Are they having to take loans and things like that to be able to get to payroll? I mean, these are things that you need to start becoming familiar with, especially if the
Uh,
overall
well,
economic outlook right now is kind of tough, kind
well,
of like in today's time. So you need to be able to keep track of the performance of your company, the health of your company to see, hey, am I at risk here? I mean, so that's kind of one of the things that you can do. And of course, there's a ton of guides that you can look up on YouTube to be able to read these quarterly reports and be able to see what are some of the risk indicators. And people that invest in the stock market, this is stuff that they look at also because they need to know whether they're investing in one stock or another of different companies, which ones are going to perform better. So it's a good skill just to have in general, especially if you're going to be investing money and things like that. But that's one of them. Be aware of all the internal factors of your company in terms of health performance, and then all of the external factors like the macro economy. We're going through a recession. Those two combined will give you a sense of, hey, is my job at risk? So that's one of the things you can do.
yeah, I mean, go follow to the list. It happens that some of my friends they were working on unpopular product, right? So maybe you are in a good company, maybe Google is doing great, or maybe Amazon is doing fantastic, right? But suddenly you are working in a product that nobody cares that they're not selling. So even and sometimes it's hard to move internally, right? So because maybe there are not that many jobs, or maybe you are in an area, let's say that you are in East Coast, West Coast, and certainly there is no Rex open, right? So yeah, that would put you in a top position as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I know when in one of the last tech companies I worked for, I had the ability to kind of steer uh, the technology that we were using, and I aligned the particular area that I was working in to be more close to the crown jewel of what we use in our technology back at HP, right? So
Well,
we
hello.
we try to align our product more closely to that, integrate it better with that, so that we were a little bit more safe, so that when things got a little bit shaky back then, we were at least protected in that sense. So we worked on different patents and things like that that integrated with our crown jewel technology. And that was a pretty good strategy that I think sheltered our teams and things like that because we were adjacent to this crown jewel. Eventually, that led to kind of the teams kind of being put together to be under this umbrella of the crown jewels. So that strategy ended up working pretty well, and that kept growing and continuing. So I think
Yeah.
be aware of the team that you're working on. If you're part of the it team, that's good news. If you're on one of these outside teams that maybe is not super important to your business or to the company or to revenue generation for your business, be aware, especially if, like I mentioned in the last thing, the health of the company is at risk, because that's where they're going to look to cut.
Yeah. And look, through my career, being a leader, I have been in the other side of the table where I have to deliver stuff new, right? So trust me, it's very hard as a leader. Sometimes if you have some of these circumstances that sometimes might not be even the performance of the person, it's literally that the role has been canceled, right? But you know that they are excellent engineers or excellent managers or excellent leaders, like, and you have to deliver the top news, right? And I'll tell you a story. Like in the past in my career, like uh, in some cases they also thank me. It's like, hey, Mando, I know that it's a top news, but I learned a lot from you, man. Like, it's a shame that I'm not gonna be able to stay longer and working with you because I have been learning a lot, and that threw me off, to be honest, because I'm literally providing a very hard piece of news, and you expect all of the emotions, right? Like all of the spectrum of some people that maybe they might be upset, or maybe some might be crying, right? Whatever is the emotion, which is valid, and any of these are valid. But that one threw me off because I was not expecting even to thank me, right? so so yeah, and again, people that are listening, if that happens to you, I can tell you that it's also hard for the person that is delivering, and a little bit of empathy for both, right? For the people that they are receiving the news and for the people that they are giving the news. Because sometimes it's tough. As companies, yes, the majority of the cases they are meant to make money. If not, you will be a non-profit, right? So, but most of the companies, yeah, they're gonna have to look for the bottom line. But also, in my opinion, it has to be in a humane way. It has to be in a very respectful and dignified way. And I can tell you, I'm not gonna out company, but some of the companies that I have been is like, what the heck, right? Like, and that's where I disagree. Right? And me as a human being, I disagree sometimes how some of these things have been delivered, and the only thing that I can say is like, hey, I completely disagree, right? And it's not the way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's going to be a tough situation on both sides of that. Of course, one will still have a job and the other is not. So, not as comfortable for those folks. But I will say, you bring up an interesting point there, Mondo, that if you feel that you don't have a good relationship with your boss or with your team in general, that might be another clue. Maybe it's just a bad culture fit. It could be a bunch of different things. But if that relationship you feel between your boss and or the rest of your team is not where it needs to be or should be, again, that should be another red flag for you that might say, hey, things aren't looking good for the company. You might be the one at the bottom or at the top of the let go list, I should say.
That's the other thing, though.
Right.
If you're too expensive, right? Like,
Mhm.
and that's literally everybody gets ranked, and maybe you are the expert there, yeah. But maybe if they bring two people more, right, they might be able and way cheaper. So you have to be aware also on how expensive you are compared to your peers, because that could be another reason.
Yeah, that's a great point. So obviously, there's lots of factors that can play into here, into these kind of red flags in your team
Mhm.
dynamics, how much you get paid, the team that you're actually working on, whether it's revenue generating or more overhead or administrative
Well,
or support. I mean, start factoring these things. Also, one other thing is, do you think there's too many people on your team? Are there too
yeah,
many people on your team? Do you think your company overhired? If you yourself feel like, man, I don't have that much on my plate, like, I could probably take on more work or whatever the case is.
or have
It's
a second job at the same
or
time, which
I can
that
have a
happens a
second
lot.
job, which can happen. You're overemployed. You might be able to think, hey, you know, there's going to be cuts, there's going to be layoffs. That same thing applies for you. If you feel like you've got extra, I mean, some people are just badass. I get that, and they're able to do their job really well. But you have to take that in consideration to your peers as well. Like, usually, if a company's hiring a badass, they're hiring a bunch of badasses because a lot of badass people want
So
to go work for a badass company, right? So that's kind of that thing. But if if it's consensus that, like, man, workload's really light, you got to be aware of that. And the same thing carries to the management level. They're
yeah,
also likely going to be thinking, oh man, there's like 5 levels of management above me. That's also a sign that that company is bloated and they may have overhired. So
yeah. And I think that Elon set up that trend again, where it's like almost like I think he called it a very flat organization, where people they were thinking that they have to go into the individual contributor, and instead of going into that ladder, they wanted to just become manager, so that way they can get paid more. So and most of the organizations, you have the structure of manager, the frontline manager, then you have a senior manager, then after that you have your directors, VPs, right, your C-suite. But
yeah.
yeah, some of these CEOs, they wanted to flatten to almost like Elon really liked it to have like one manager and the contributor. So no level.
Yeah, for sure. In the HR space, I know there's this kind of target ratio of, like, let's say 7 people per team with the manager and things like that. But you might bloat a little bit too much, so just be aware of that, and don't fall into the trap of getting too comfortable there.
I have noticed through my experience that it gets more difficult when you start having about 15, 20 direct reports. Sure, you can have 30, 50, right? But to be honest, even a one-on-one, you won't be able to have a one-on-one very often, right? Maybe once a month or so. But yeah, it gets trickier when you start having a large amount of number of direct reports. So maybe you might be asking yourself, all right, how I can make sure that I'm not in that list, right? You selfish bubble.
what, what do they say about running away from bears? Is don't be the slowest person running
That's
away.
right. I think that you can apply that here. Yes, it's like a very, if you don't need to be the fastest runner, right? But at least the less fat, right?
Yeah, the one with less grasa, less manteca around the middle.
Yeah, to be able to
You'll
run.
be
That's your exactly
right.
to not be in that top. I mean the bottom 10%, 20%, just based on the statistics that we just were talking in the beginning, right? So uh, I have said this over and over because I think that is a key. Your work ethic. Do what you said. What would you do, right? Like, come on, man. Like, if you said I'm gonna show up in a meeting, just be on time in the meeting, right? Just have the agenda, right? I really think that is super important, right? Um, and another thing for me is that you have to be proactive. Like if I have my team members and I see that they are like, I'm trying to pull teeth, and it's like, what the heck with these people, right? I mean, they the companies they call it compensation because they're compensating you for your time, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to go to that meeting. Like, me neither, bro. I mean, like, come on, man. Like, you think that I just wake up and like, oh, I'm super excited to go to 3 meetings.
Meeting time.
They're like, no, I mean, it's like, but exactly, that's that they're compensating me too for my time, right? So, um, do the stuff that matters. Uh, Also try to keep learning on different skill sets, right? Like, I remember you had a bunch of certifications for when you were becoming a PM, and it's like that important, right? Like to have all of these things because you keep learning. In my case, I just learned a different coding language because you have to, at least in technology, you have to keep yourself used to whatever is the new tech, right? I learned React 3 years back, and I have learned as well Golang, which are programming languages. Uh, Again, if you are maybe a designer, there are tools like Figma that just came out of nowhere, right? And people start using now, right? So, uh, and then you become uh, basically it will move you on top of the list, right? What else?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with all those things that you said. I mean, sometimes it's just the basics, right? Like, just make sure that you don't have super big deficiencies, right? Like Mondo always says, do what you said you would do. That's a very basic thing. And it comes down to your work ethic. And I will share, like, I'm going through like this big go live right now, and we've been having just every single day for the last couple of weeks. We start off with a meeting at 6:45 a.m. and our last meeting ends at 6 p.m. So, I mean, just realize some of these things are temporary. You'll get through them, but
No,
just part of the process. Be willing to put in the time and the work and the ethic, and that'll at least be recognized because those folks know when they're letting a big part of the team go. They know that it's going to be hard times coming in, so they need people that have grit. That's going to be able to carry the company forward through those kind of tough lean times. So if you've exhibited those things during the good times, they're going to remember that during the tough times. So, I
no,
mean, I think that grit piece is pretty important. Okay, and those relevant skills. And here's one of the things, though. I think as a leader, if you're learning a bunch of random things that aren't necessarily connecting with your job, that might be a red flag for your leadership, for your management. They're thinking, okay, are they trying to look to change their career path or something like that?
really.
So when you are
Mm.
learning these new skills, which I always suggest, you've got to
I
keep
can,
stacking your skills. Make sure that it's relevant to your job. Like Mondo
yeah,
mentioned in my case, project management. I've got a lot of certifications in project management, right, for all the different methodologies and frameworks. That's super important. Also, being in healthcare, go out and getting those healthcare certifications as well. So that's also pretty important. But so those are, I think, the basic things that you can do. Now, we mentioned the bear's going to get the gordito, right? The one that's too slow. So,
yeah,
so what can you do to not be the gordito? Okay, you don't want to be the last one on the list in terms of performance and things like that, because a lot of times they're going to look at the bell curve and they're going to be like, okay, we're going to get rid of the most expensive guy, and we're going to get rid of the two like slackers. Okay, what can you do to not be one of the last two slackers on your team? Be aware, first of all, where you fall in your team. If you think you're in the bottom, then that's a red flag for you, right? So at the very least, you can even try game the system. You know what? A lot of
yeah.
people, they've got the mouse jigglers and stuff like that, because a lot of teams that are now working remotely, they're looking at statistics of like mouse clicks, mouse movement, keyboard movement, how many meetings, Microsoft with Teams and stuff like that. I know Slack is out there. They've got all this stuff, technology now on our
Even the
PCs that
VPN,
all
like
runs
what
well.
time you are connecting to work, right? So they
Exactly.
have all of that information and it gets factored in. So, yeah. And again, it's not about gaming the system, but being aware that, if we are waking up and suddenly you just connect at 11 a.m., but sometimes some engineers might do that, right? In their defense, some people are not morning person. They wake up at 10, but guess what? They'll stay maybe 2 a.m., 3 a.m. So, and again, on the system, if you're connecting on the VPN, you will be able to. So maybe you're connecting very late, but also staying very late. So for me as a leader, I don't give a crap as long as you are literally putting the hours and finishing your projects that you need to, right?
For sure. Yeah. So I think those are important things that you can do. Again, try not to be at the bottom of the list. Be aware of where you land, and need to bump it up a little bit. Bump it up a little bit.
Yeah. And some of these are obvious, but then what people don't do it, right? Like, I'll give you another example. Be responsive. It's like when somebody's sending you a message, put noise on the Slack or Teams, whatever is the application. So in that way, almost instantaneously, you are able to be present. Like, yeah, this is the thing that you're asking me or answering the query, right? So because right now sometimes I see 3 hours, next day. what the heck, right? So like just following up in all of the communication, right? So be engaged. If you're in remote, try to put your camera on, right? So because right now people are like turning off the camera. I get it. Sometimes you don't. You maybe just wake up and you like, it's like Ramirez is not putting his makeup, you know. So it's
Sorry,
like
y'all. Didn't shave this morning.
that's right, that's right. So we get it, right? Some people are a little more high maintenance than others, or but yeah, try to just be more engaged when you are, or it could be in the document, right? Sometimes like you're not contributing to the meeting, participating. I know that sometimes, and at least in tech and engineering, you also have a good portion of people that are introverted. They don't want to be in cameras. They don't want to say anything on the meetings. You are like literally they hate to be in meetings, right? But guess what? Uh, you want it to be able to be engaged. It may be writing is your thing. Learn better communication skills through writing, right? Write documents, write proposals, and you can do silent reads, right, to be able to pass your proposal. And again, it's just part of be responsive and be engaged in your team.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think that's super, super important engagement. If someone looks disengaged, you're making that decision for them, for the leadership, right? You're making the
Very easy.
decision for them because you're like, oh, they probably don't care or they don't, they're not interested in being in this job. So, you know what?
Uh,
Easy call. They're not going to say anything. They're not going to put up a fight. You're going to get chopped. All right. But
yeah.
to Mondo's point, there are different personalities. So understand what your strengths are and use your strengths to your advantage. Like the example of writing, great example. Like use that to your advantage. You don't have to be the outspoken one in a meeting, but maybe
Well,
you're really good at piecing together, analyzing something or putting together a strategy. Use that to your advantage and make sure people know that you put those things together. So good thoughts there,
uh,
Mondo.
in the over here in America, we index on extroversion. So to be able to have people that they are extroverted and presenting and like a flawless presentation, being able to be articulated while talking, etc., etc. Right. But in other cultures, it's kind of the I don't want to say the opposite, but actually they are more inclined to more in the introversion, right? So being in a diverse team, it's important that you, as a leader, if we have leaders also listen, to be aware that don't disregard those that they are not able. Maybe also reflect yourself to see, okay, is this person actually contributing and being engaged uh, in different means, right? And or maybe it's a coder. Maybe literally the person might not communicate, might not have documents, but man, it's three times the production of lines of code, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and again, you have to see it as a whole, right? On the person. But yeah, going back to don't fall into the bottom 20% of your team. I don't know, man. Sometimes your
Hey,
your
your mileage
your
may vary on that 20%. I don't know.
yeah, it's because I was in Twitter, man, and you knew in the top 0.2% to survive, right? So and yeah, it's like it's tough, but it's doable. You can do it.
Hey, when your leader is a bit extreme, you might expect some extreme consequences there too, right? So it's kind of hard to tell, but yeah, generally 20 could be 95%.
Yeah, the
Yeah, I don't
20 is
know.
fine, but you have leaders like Elon Musk where he's like, nope, we're gonna cut 95% of the people. So that 20%, he would not cut it, right? So you would have
Yeah,
to be as fit as an athlete to just be in that top 5%, right? So
yeah.
he calls because we were in a meeting, he called us exceptional engineers. Everybody that is here, you guys are exceptional engineers. So
It's an honor to be cut from this company.
I should put it on my t-shirt. I'm an exceptional engineer.
Yeah, and to your point, Mondo, I think even if you implement these strategies, sometimes it is what it is. and it's going to happen. So, I mean, okay, so let's say you do get laid off, even if you followed all of our tips and tricks here. What's next? What do you do then?
I think that also you're making good money. You need to have some money saved up. Literally, there is no excuse there, man. Right? It's like you have if if you're like spending a nice trip and your Tesla, right? A couple Teslas too, right? It's like, come on, if you're not having a nice nest egg, right? You're allocating a percentage of your income to have savings for your rainy day. Guess what? If you are in a layoff process, then that rainy day happen, right? It's happening. So uh, if you're not there, yeah, I just try to make sure, right? It's hard for everyone. Uh, a nice book that I recommend everyone to read is The Richest Man of Babylon. Uh, it's one of the rules to be able to get kind of survive, and it's an ancient rule, right? So yeah, I think that even before you get to that point, that's kind of the preventive portion. Now,
That's
in my
true.
opinion, if you are there, if you already got the letter or the HR, or maybe you just got the message in your laptop right now, you cannot access. Sure, take your time to be able to reflect, right? Because to close the chapter, that psychology could mess with you. I have friends that they mess with their with their mindset. Like, it's okay, it happened to everyone, right? Sometimes to very good people, even CEOs, right? CEOs and athletes. This is part of the of life. Don't take it too personal, right? Try to learn of what are the things that you maybe did. Sometimes they might be able to tell you, "Hey, I think that you dropped the ball here, here, and here, here," and that's the reason why. Sometimes they might not be able to tell you, and you have to live with it. So, but guess what? Take it as an opportunity, because there might be other jobs that even they might even pay you more. So let's say that you are got a layoff in maybe some mid-range company, and suddenly, well, why not to try to go to farm, right? And the compensations for farm are very juicy. You're thinking that maybe you can get 400K, 500K, 1 million bucks, man, on a yearly salary, right? So uh, let's discuss that. What is the compensation? Because sometimes that's one of the questions that people ask me, because I have been in Prague almost 8 years, 7 8 years. So uh, how do they work, right? How Amazon or how Google, Tesla, or Apple structure their compensation? And usually what happens though is that you have a base salary, and sometimes it's capped. Like, everybody does the same salary to a certain level, because the majority of what you want is your variable, which is your RSUs. The RSUs stand for restricted stock unit. And and also the other thing that you need to know is vesting and unvested. Are you familiar with that term?
Oh yeah. So for sure, I think if you're starting a new company, you need to be understanding what are the different requirements for you to hit certain goalposts, right? So uh, a lot of it's real common for it to be between 3 and 5 years for you to vest within your specific stock plan and things like that. So again, the goal is for you to be a more longer term employee. A lot of these employers understand that people in the tech industry might have the proclivity to jump from one job to another. So they put some of these things in place to encourage you to stick
The
around. And
the rule of thumb is 4 years. Like, is what Silicon Valley kind of adopted, because they did a lot of analysis that you want, as a company, you want to retain good talent for at least 4 years. So it's a win-win situation. And when you literally you start not vesting after year one. So your first year, they give you maybe other bonuses. They even might give you kind of like when you're joining the company, a bonus just for joining the company. Sometimes they might help you to relocate. Maybe you're in Texas and maybe they want you to move to San Francisco, uh, and so on, right? So there might be another incentive there for you to be able to do it. And sometimes the perks and the benefits are pretty good, man.
you know,
Have you hit any outrageous perks?
Well, and on the bonuses, I would say like all of these things are negotiable. Remember when you're starting up with a new company, a new business. Now, understand the climate that you're in terms of, hey, all these companies just did layoffs. You may not have as much negotiation power, but a lot of these things are negotiable. So, like I know I negotiated a sign-on bonus and a relocation bonus, even though like I was only relocating like 100 miles. Like it was not really even a. But a lot of times, their HR has a minimum. Like it has to be at least a 50-mile move or a 60-mile move or something like that.
Mhm.
And so you meet that, you're able to get that bonus. So that's kind of free money at that point. You just gotta be aware and ask for those things. In terms of
Are you familiar?
perks,
Are you familiar with Blind, the application?
blind. No, I
No.
haven't seen. Oh, is that
Ah,
where people post their packages?
yes. Basically, you have to have an email from a company. They're gonna ask you in order to get in. But when
Hmm.
you're in, you can ask others what are the compensation packages. And actually, that's kind of the culture internally of the application. And they call it blind theory. It's anonymous, most of the people, because they literally sometimes go like, these leaders suck because of this, and this, and this, or don't join Google's ads division because of this, and this, and this. So it's just a lot of gossip on the companies. But one of the internal kind of rules is that TC is just a lot of acronyms, and TC stands for total compensation. And sometimes you see TC space GTFO or not GTFO. So the tag for you to be able to post a message in blind is to spell out your the total compensation. If not GTFO, right? Good. Okay. And we'll
Yeah.
link this. So, but yeah, when you go to blind, there's a lot of information there to for you to be able to understand how to negotiate. So, and a lot of people will tell you because that's part of the culture on the application. People don't care because it's blind and it's literally anonymous, and they will tell you, no, 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 you're negotiating too low. Negotiate a little bit more, or don't go above this. So it's a great risk.
Yeah, that's a really good tip there, Mando. Just because a lot of times, especially if you might be new to the Fang game, you don't know where to start, and especially if you're not coming from Fang, you might not be familiar with everything that's really available to you. So do your research. Like, make sure you get in there and understand how to negotiate. Don't let them put you in a little box. You make sure you break out of that box and make sure you get what you have worked so hard for. So, I mean, you mentioned Mondo. What are some of the crazy things that I've heard? Obviously there's like your basics, right? You're gonna get insurance, you're gonna get PTO, and in some cases unlimited PTO because they know people working at these top places, they tend to be workaholics anyway, so they're not
Right.
going to take that much PTO. So it's kind of a mind game in a way. But I've you see free food, free lunch, free Starbucks. You see beer. I mean, you see all kinds of stuff. Nap pods. People. I mean, there's all kinds of things really once you get into this Fang space. But
Music rooms. Like you
music
can have
rooms.
a
Oh,
room that has like
video game
guitars,
rooms.
piano. Yep,
Hmm.
yep, yep.
And some of this stuff is trickling down to like your everyday tech company as well. But you see a lot of these things in Fang.
Well,
Laundry services. I mean, we've seen laundry services for a long time, especially if you need to get stuff pressed and things like that. You know, you see all that kind of stuff.
yeah, for sure. So I think that another one lately is on the working from home, right? So some companies still allow you 100% remote. And some other companies, maybe they are doing return to office. They might say, you know what, maybe do 2 days or 3 days at work, at the office, and maybe again 2 3 days at your home, right? So they are becoming part of the perks. So maybe now your question might be, how do I land that job? Like sign me up, right? How do I land a 500K tech job this year, right? So I think that sometimes, in my opinion, you might have to relocate to some areas where there are tech hubs, right? So you have San Francisco, which is the Bay Area, right? That's obviously kind of the mecca of tech jobs. Seattle, and Austin. And you start seeing different areas, like sometimes Miami, right? Like he's trying to become, or
Mhm.
Boulder over there in Colorado, right? So they are popping up a little more, even as well in Washington, D.C. So again, in other areas, but the main ones are those. Um, the other thing, because I have been attending some of events to start recruiting people, um, and I have interviewed, I don't know, 500 people, right, in the last couple of years. Um, Interns, they have an advantage though, because if they're able to get into FANG, it's just trickles through the resume. Because even if they were like maybe 3 months in their internship, like, hey, I was in Apple or I was in Amazon or Google, right? Then you start noticing the resume, and then they start building on top of that, right?
For sure. I
Um,
mean, even like in kind of an adjacent area like healthcare, if we see those on your resume, that's almost an automatic. You're going to get to at least the next round, right? So, or you're going to at least get an interview. So, those do always stand out, even in non-fang and non-tech. Even you'll
well,
see, especially if you see Google. I mean, like you mentioned, Mondo. I think some of the it's almost like it's a name brand. People understand that
it
brand, know
is.
what comes with it. So there's that's a good thing. And especially if you started off early in your career, like as an intern, that's going to almost help you set like a floor to your career. And you're going to be
Yeah.
able to kind of jump up from there.
When you are drafting your resume, almost put the logos of the places that you work. Uh, I'm surprised that people don't do that, because guess what? People recognize their logo. So imagine if you have a logo that you are from Amazon, Twitter, and so on, right? So uh, the logos, they are very helpful for the person that is reading, because it stands out. And people recognize a lot of these logos. So you have one of those logos that everyone recognizes. It could be even like Nike, everybody, McDonald's, Coca-Cola. Sure, might not be in tech, but you recognize those brands and those companies. Then it's okay. Let me dive into the experience. What did they did there, right? But yeah, I think that that's one portion. The other portion for me in my teams, usually I give priority uh, for referrals. Because if I know that the person is pretty good, and an A player likes to hang out with an A player, it's very likely that if they are recommending the person, and they will tell you, it's like, hey, you know what? I just met this person in a party. So don't blame me if it doesn't work, but here it is. And they tell you upfront if they know them, because that's the next question that I ask. Have you worked with this person, or do you know this person? And I give basically, in this type of companies, there is a process, and in another episode we can discuss the type of process that it goes through. But what I can do is to put them at at the top of the list, right, to be able to give them priority, because in some cases the list is long. Some cases it's 300 people, 400 people on the resumes, and I'm just giving you tips how your resume can stand out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you have a referral, you need to use it, but use it. Be careful also who you're asking for. If that person is not seen as a as a good worker or something like that, that may also kind of backfire on you. But in generally, that referral is going to be a good thing, especially if it's like from the hiring manager and things like that. So real good tip there, and that's an easy way to at least try and get that interview.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes people, when I hear them, like I've been in events for that they're only like females, right? Because we discussed in the previous episode, Press Hoppers, we also have SWE or Afrotech. There are conferences for certain niches. And sometimes I hear, oh, but I'm in a disadvantage because I'm black, right? So, and sometimes I'm thinking, like, I'm telling my daughters, it's like, imagine if you're in tech, you're female, Hispanic, and if you are, obviously you have to be a good programmer or a good coder or whatever, right? Whatever it is the tech. Then you are checking a lot of these things, right? Like you're becoming almost like like super necessary, right? So diversity count, like don't feel it as a disadvantage. On the contrary, I think that is an advantage if you are in some of those minority groups.
And to your point, I mean, seek out some of these actual groups and organizations, because if a business or a company is coming specifically to these organizations to do some kind of hiring fair and things like that, they're aware of what they're looking for, and they're gonna go out and get it. So like if you do fall into one of these groups, again, use it to your advantage. Go to a
Uh-huh.
fair or something like that, like Mondo mentioned in a previous pod about the Grace Hopper Conference. Like, work with those things, be involved in these organizations as well if you can. I mean, even better, you can always be part of a chair if you want, or a chair within the organization, or represent in some kind of on the board or something like that. There's some things that you can do. So that's always
Yeah.
a good sign.
And obviously the last ones, right? The last ones are obvious, but which is you have to be good on the craft, right? So if
Hmm.
you're a coder, you have to go to Lead Code. That's the name of just Google it. That's the name of the website. And they have different type of problems for coding. So you have a entry level, basic level, medium level, and hard level. Usually, depending of the role that you're going after, you might have to be between medium to hard. And you have to be able to program and resolve those in 15 to 20 minutes, because sometimes they ask you to two programs in one session. So that's number one. The other one is to be able to understand systems design and architecture. That's kind of your almost 60% of the interview. And obviously the other obvious thing is your behavior. You'll chat with the manager, with the hiring manager, to see if you're a good fit. And depending on the company, they call them leadership principles. Like, can this person is an owner? Is this person has a customer in mind or product mindset? Can this person grow? Can this person, is it curious? Did they finish the project, right? Obviously, they're trying to get these signals, these metrics uh, in 1 hour session. And yeah, like, it's also hard to be in the other side, because you're trying to rank and measure the person in a very unbiased way, to be able to do it. Once again, I have done many of these. I was a bar racer, which is basically a judge for this type of thing. So, um, and I think that those are obvious, but yeah, pay attention to the behaviors. If they are, sometimes they give you information, or like the recruiter will tell you, hey, read this list, read this information, because they're gonna ask you. And it's so funny, because sometimes I can tell that they didn't even read the list. The questions were
Yes.
there.
Read the position description before you go into the interview. That's kind
It
of an
sounds
easy
obvious,
thing.
but it's so often people don't do it.
Yeah, that's what they're looking for in the job. So make sure you understand it, know it, be able to answer questions around the areas that they're talking about. So, Mondo, you mentioned a little bit about this, but when you're going into here, I mean, there's some hard skills, like you mentioned,
And
practicing on leak code, but there's also the soft skills, right? And the
yeah,
percentage of hard skills to soft skills, and soft skills being kind of your management skills, your people skills, those types
communication.
of
Yep,
things,
yep.
communication skills. Uh, Depending on the level of job you're looking for, if you're looking more of maybe a management job, maybe soft skills might be a little bit more important than the hard skills. If you're looking more for
Yeah.
like a principal position in terms of for like architect or something like that, maybe the hard skills are going to be more important and less of the soft skills. But if you're also, or if you're looking for a position that is working with all of your individual contributor coders, things like that, but then also communicating with leadership and senior leadership and management, then maybe you need both. And it should be like a half and half. So just be aware what type of job you're going to be applying for and what kind of skills mix you're going to need between hard skills and soft skills.
Yeah, and it goes, as you say, a ratio. It could be almost in a 90% hard skills, 10% non. But I think that the most average maybe 70-30, right? 70% of hard, 30% of the other ones. But you start seeing that ratio. Maybe some people actually 50-50, right? I'm a little more balanced. So, and it's okay for you to ask this question to the recruiter. It's like, hey, what is the percentage of time that I want to have to code? And they will tell you, no, this is like almost coding all the time. Or no, you're going to have to have 50% between uh, PM, right? Your product manager, and your designers, right? You have to come to literally, it's a very cross-functional team. And maybe you spend 20-30% of your time there and the rest coding. Again, it's okay for you to be able to ask this type of questions on when you are even before you are interviewing, so that way you are aware.
Yeah, and you bring up a real good point here. When a lot of times when people think of FANG, these tech companies, they're thinking coding only. But like Bando mentioned, there's a lot of aspects that you can apply to in these companies. It's not just being a lead coder, but you can also go into project management. You can also go into product management, UI, UX design. These are other functional areas that 10
Mhm.
companies are also looking for. And so, especially if you can cross the bridge between technical and management, that I think that gives you a little bit more flexibility as well.
There is a difference. Some people as well ask me, what is the difference between a product manager versus project manager versus a technical uh, project manager? They're intertwined a little bit, but depending on the type of company, some companies are very product oriented, and what that means is that product, they are looking into the competition. They're trying to look what are the features or for that avatar or that persona. They wanted to create a product, very product oriented. And the program manager, well, Eric is an expert here, but it's basically trying to make sure that the project is happy, right? Like I'm managing all of the different dependencies and all of that. And the difference with the technical project manager will be that they can dive a little bit more in the code, right, to start actually understanding a little more of the dependencies. And some companies, they do have a role for a technical project manager. So, but yeah, it's a good distinction as well there. And again, you can be, or the other one is the designers, right? Like UX designers, and there are as well different levels for those as well.
Yeah, for sure. So just be aware that if you're interested in getting into FANG, you and you don't really want to be coding all the time, there are some other options for you as well. So just be
For sure.
aware. All right.
Yeah.
So I think we covered a lot of good topics here for those interested in FANG and maybe those have been recently affected with layoffs or things like that. Some tips and tricks here for you to be able to do. So if you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, share with your friends. We're starting out here, so we need a little bit of the help, and we're asking you to do what you can to help us be successful. We're trying to help you out. Hey, return the favor. Any closing thoughts, Mando?
No, just I'll leave coding.
All right. Hopefully, we can all be elite, and we'll see y'all next time. All right. Sin miedo.
Peace. Bye.
Later.